much deeper. I got nightmares in my head, I fear. Thoughts build up until I can't hear. That my mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper.
Speculate, get into the political dynamic of the case. For Utah County, this is
Hey guys, it looks like the press conference is about to begin. So good to see you all. Chelsea, thanks for being here. Let's go over and just see what's going on there.
Team and our county commissioners, but Jeff is going to be the only one speaking right now, and I'll introduce right now County Attorney Jeff Gray.
Volume is really low.
The murder of Charlie Kirk is an American tragedy. Charlie Kirk was murdered while engaging in one of our most sacred and cherished American rights. He loved and bedrock of our democratic republic. The free exchange of ideas in a search for truth, understanding, and a more perfect union. It is also an offense against the state and to the peace and enjoyment of the people of Utah and of all those who visit here. But Charlie Kirk's murder also strikes a more personal and intimate chord. Charlie Kirk was first and foremost a husband and a father to two beautiful young children.
All right, sorry about that. I think we're going to rather go to this feed. I think it's a better alternative. Let's go to this one from Fox. Sorry about that.
The murder of Charlie Kirk is an American tragedy. Charlie Kirk was murdered while engaging in one of our most sacred and cherished American rights, the bedrock of our democratic republic, the free exchange of ideas in a search for truth, understanding, and a more perfect union. It is also an offense against the state and to the peace and enjoyment of the people of Utah and of all those who visit here. But Charlie Kirk's murder also strikes a more...
Okay, well, it's really annoying when this happens. This is the joy of doing a live. I just want to see if there's a better audio from the Associated Press. Just hold on a sec.
Intentionally or knowing, I take this responsibility.
It just sort of feels like the audio is crap no matter where you go.
And a more perfect union.
Okay, well, we'll have to make do with that. Sorry, guys.
Personal and intimate chord. Charlie Kirk was...
I do think the audio from the Associated Press is just slightly better. So let's go to that. Oh, it's so annoying. Anyway.
It is also an offense against the state and to the peace and enjoyment of the people of Utah and of all those who visit here. But Charlie Kirk's murder also strikes a more personal and intimate chord. Charlie Kirk was first and foremost a husband and a father to two beautiful young children. He was a son, he was a brother, and a friend. Like all murders, the senseless and needless taking of Charlie Kirk's life has shattered the lives of those he loved and those who loved him. To Charlie's wife, Erica, his two young children, his parents, his family, and his friends, I express my sincere condolences and offer my heartfelt prayers on your behalf. I also want to express my concern for everyone who was at Charlie's Turning Point USA event at the Utah Valley University, and all who have been impacted by this tragedy. As county attorney, I am charged with bringing justice to those who offend our laws. I am charged with bringing justice for those who harm for those who are harmed. I am charged with bringing justice for Charlie Kirk. I am committed to these aims. I take this responsibility seriously. Today, after reviewing the evidence that law enforcement has collected thus far, I am filing a criminal information charging Tyler James Robinson, age 22, with the following crimes. Count 1, aggravated murder, a capital offense for intentionally or knowingly causing the death of Charlie Kirk under circumstances that created a great risk of death to others. Count 2, felony discharge of a firearm causing serious bodily injury, a first-degree felony. The state is further alleging aggravating factors on counts 1 and 2 because the defendant is believed to have targeted Charlie Kirk based on Charlie Kirk's political expression and did so knowing that children were present and would witness the homicide. The state is also charging defendant with count 3, obstruction of justice, a second-degree felony for moving and concealing the rifle used in the shooting. Count 4, obstruction of justice, a second-degree felony for disposing the clothing he wore during the shooting. Count 5, witness tampering, a third-degree felony for directing his roommate to delete his incriminating texts. Count 6, witness tampering, a third-degree felony for directing his roommate to stay silent if police questioned him. And count 7, commission of a violent offense in the presence of a child, a Class A misdemeanor, for committing homicide knowing that children were present and may have seen or heard the murder and did so based on Charlie Kirk's political expression. Also, following the press conference, I am filing a notice of intent to seek the death penalty. I do not take this decision lightly, and it is a decision I have made independently as county attorney, based solely on the available evidence and circumstances and nature of the crime. Because we are seeking the death penalty, the defendant will continue to be held without bail in the Utah County Jail. Turning to the 10-page information, these are the allegations. On September 10th, 2025, at approximately 12:23 p.m., Charlie Kirk was shot and killed while speaking to a large crowd on the campus of Utah Valley University in Orem, Utah. Police found the suspected murder weapon, a bolt-action 30-06 rifle, nearby. Over the next approximately 33 hours, police conducted a manhunt for the shooter until the evening of September 11th, 2025, when Tyler James Robinson surrendered to police at the Washington County Sheriff's Office. DNA consistent with Robinson was found on the rifle's trigger. After shooting Mr. Kirk, Robinson hid the gun, discarded the clothing he wore when he fired the rifle, and told his roommate to delete incriminating text messages and not talk to police. Children were present at the time of the shooting. The shooting. Turning Point USA, a nonprofit organization founded in 2012 by Charlie Kirk, organized a public outdoor event to be held at noon on September 10th, 2025 at UVU. The event was the first in a series of similar events to be held at college campuses nationwide. Mr. Kirk is a well-known conservative activist, famous for these type of events, where he discusses various political issues and debates with audience members. His events and comments have garnered a significant number of supporters and drawn the ire of many who disagree with his political views. The event at UVU was announced far in advance and garnered significant publicity and interest. Consequently, several hundred people attended. Mr. Kirk was interacting with the crowd before the event officially got underway. Then, at approximately noon, Mr. Kirk seated himself under a portable canopy behind a table and microphone. He began speaking to the crowd and fielding questions from attendees, a format Mr. Kirk commonly used at his events. Mr. Kirk allowed his questioners to approach a microphone positioned directly in front of him. Mr. Kirk's team members were very close to him on his right and left, as well as some behind his canopy and others at various close locations near him. The large crowd surrounded Mr. Kirk on three sides. Temporary metal fencing separated attendees from Mr. Kirk by only a matter of feet. Directly above and behind Mr. Kirk was the UVU Hall of Flags, an indoor walkway spanning several hundred feet with floor-to-ceiling glass windows which overlooked the plaza where Mr. Kirk was seated. People were in the walkway at the time of the shooting. Approximately 15 minutes into the event, Mr. Kirk was answering a question about mass shootings by transgender individuals when a gunshot rang out. The bullet struck Mr. Kirk in the neck. He slumped to the ground almost immediately. The bullet's trajectory passed closely to several other individuals beside Mr. Kirk, including the questioner who was standing directly in front of Mr. Kirk. Children were visible near Mr. Kirk's stage when he was shot. Mr. Kirk was rushed to a nearby hospital where he was declared deceased. The medical examiner's report is still pending. So UVU surveillance. So at the moment of the shot, a UVU police officer was watching the crowd from an elevated vantage point. As soon as he heard the shot, he began to scan the area for threats. Believing the shot came from a rifle because of its sound, he looked for potential sniper positions. He noted a roof area approximately 160 yards away from Mr. Kirk as a potential shooting position and rushed there to look for evidence. The suspected shooting position is adjacent to an open, publicly accessible walkway. To access the suspected location, a person must climb over a railing and then drop to the roof only slightly below. The user having lain on the roof, impressions in the gravel potentially left by the elbows, knees, and feet of a person in a prone shooting position. Police reviewed surveillance from the camera covering the roof and discovered that it recorded an individual dressed in dark clothing cross the railing from the public walkway and drop onto the roof at approximately 12:15 p.m. Although the individual moved out of the camera's view for a short time, the camera again captured the individual running across the roof and then low crawling to the area the UVU officer recognized as where the suspected sniper had dropped into a prone shooting position. After a short time, which matches the known time of the shot, the individual arose and ran across the roof to the northeast. This discovery led to an intensive review of UVU surveillance recordings to attempt to track and identify the suspect. Surveillance revealed the following. At approximately 11:51 a.m., the suspect entered campus from the north. He is seen wearing a black shirt with an American flag in the center, a dark baseball cap, and large sunglasses. Throughout the surveillance, the suspect keeps his head down and rarely raises his head enough to get a clear image of his face. As he proceeds across the campus, he is seen walking with an unusual gait. The suspect walks with very little bending in his right leg, consistent with a rifle being hidden in his pants. This unusual gait continues until the suspect is seen crossing the railway off the open walkway and onto the roof, where he leaves the camera's view. A camera later captures the suspect as he runs across the roof to the suspected shooting position. Immediately after the shot was fired, a camera captures the suspect running across the roof carrying an item whose shape is consistent with a rifle. The suspect is then seen climbing down from the roof. He appears to drop the item he was carrying as he hits the ground in a controlled fall. He then picks up the item and runs toward the northeast end of campus. Expanded crime scene investigation. Law enforcement officers followed the suspect's escape path to the northeast end of campus, where they believe the suspect left campus and entered a wooded area. In that wooded area, investigators found a bolt-action rifle wrapped in a towel. The rifle contained 1 spent round and 3 unspent rounds. This is consistent with the facts officers observed at the time of and immediately after the shootings. No shell casings were found on the roof, suggesting a bolt action rather than an auto-loading weapon, and only a single round was fired. Each round in the rifle contained an etched inscription as follows. The fired cartridge was etched, "No Tice's bulge, OWO, what's this?" The second cartridge that was again not spent, the last 3 were not spent, were not fired. The second, "Hey fascist, catch," with arrow symbols. The third cartridge, "Oh Bella Chow, Bella Chow, Bella Chow, Chow Chow." The fourth cartridge, "If you read this, you are gay," LMAO. The rifle, ammunition rounds, and towel were sent for forensic processing. DNA consistent with defendant was found on the trigger, other parts of the rifle, the fired cartridge casing, 2 of the 3 unfired cartridges, and the towel. Law enforcement was unable to immediately locate the shooter, so they published photos of the shooter from the UVU surveillance cameras and asked for the public's help to identify him. Meanwhile, law enforcement continued to try to identify the shooter through other means. The Washington County investigation. On the evening of September 11th, 2025, as law enforcement continued their investigation, Tyler James Robinson went to the Washington County Sheriff's Office with his parents and a family friend to turn himself in. Robinson's mother stated that the following to police. On September 11th, 2025, the day after the shooting, Robinson's mother saw the photo of the shooter in the news and thought the shooter looked like her son. Robinson's mother called her son and asked him where he was. He said he was at home sick and that he had also been at home homesick on September 10th. Robinson's mother expressed concern to her husband that the suspect shooter looked like Robinson. Robinson's father agreed. Robinson's mother explained that over the last year or so, Robinson had become more political and had started to lean more to the left, becoming more pro-gay and trans rights oriented. She stated that Robinson began to date his roommate, a biological male who was transitioning genders. This resulted in several discussions with family members, but especially between Robinson and his father, who have very different political views. In one conversation before the shooting, Robinson mentioned that Charlie Kirk would be holding an event at UVU, which Robinson said was a stupid venue for the event. Robinson accused Kirk of spreading hate. Robinson's father reported that when his wife showed him the surveillance image of the suspected shooter in the news, he agreed that it looked like their son. He also believed that the rifle that police suspected the shooter used matched a rifle that was given to his son as a gift. As a result, Robinson's father contacted his son and asked him to send a photo of the rifle. Robinson did not respond. However, Robinson's father spoke on the phone with Robinson. Robinson implied that he planned to take his own life. Robinson's parents were able to convince him to meet at their home. As they discussed the situation, Robinson implied that he was the shooter and stated that he couldn't go to jail and just wanted to end it. When asked why he did it, Robinson explained there is too much evil and the guy, referring to Charlie Kirk, spreads too much hate. They talked about Robinson turning himself in and convinced Robinson to speak with a family friend who is a retired deputy sheriff. At Robinson's father's request, the family friend met with Robinson and his parents and convinced Robinson to turn himself in. The family friend spoke to police and reported telling Robinson that it would be best if he brought all evidence with him to the sheriff's office to avoid police having to search his parents' home. The friend also asked Robinson if he had any clothes that were related to what he did. Robinson replied that he had disposed of the clothes in different areas. The roommate. Police interviewed Robinson's roommate, a biological male who was involved in a romantic relationship with Robinson. The roommate told police that the roommate received messages from Robinson about the shooting, and he did provide those messages to police. On September 10th, 2025, the roommate received a text message from Robinson which said, "Drop what you're doing. Look under my keyboard." The roommate looked under the keyboard and found a note that stated, quote, "I had the opportunity to take out Charlie Kirk, and I'm going to take it." Police found a photograph of this note. The following text exchange, then took place. After reading the note, the roommate responded, "What? You're joking, right?" Robinson, "I am still okay, my love, but I'm stuck in Orem for a little while longer yet. Shouldn't be long until I can come home, but I gotta grab my rifle still. To be honest, I had hoped to keep this secret till I died of old age. I am sorry to involve you." Roommate, "You weren't the one who did it, right?" Robinson, I am. I'm sorry." Roommate, "I thought they caught the person." Robinson, "No, they grabbed some crazy old dude, then interrogated someone in similar clothing. I had planned to grab my rifle from my drop point shortly after, but most of that side of town got locked down. It's quiet, almost enough to get out, but there's one vehicle lingering." Roommate, "Why?" Robinson, "Why did I do it?" Roommate, "Yeah." Robinson, "I had enough of his hatred. Some hate can't be negotiated out. If I am able to grab my rifle unseen, I will have left no evidence. Going to attempt to retrieve it again. Hopefully they have moved on. I haven't seen anything about them finding it." Roommate, "How long have you been planning this?" Robinson, "A bit over a week, I believe. I can get close to it, but there is a squad car parked right by it. I think they already swept that spot, but I don't want to chance it." Robinson again, "I'm wishing I had circled back and grabbed it as soon as I got to my vehicle. I'm worried what my old man would do if I didn't bring back Grandpa's rifle. IDEK if it's had a serial number, but it wouldn't trace to me. I worry about prints. I had to leave it in a bush where I changed outfits. Didn't have the ability or time to bring it with. I might have to abandon it and hope they don't find prints. How the F will I explain losing it to my old man? Only thing I left was the rifle wrapped in a towel. Remember how I was engraving bullets? The F in messages are mostly a big meme. If I see notice bulge UWU on Fox News, I might have a stroke, all right. I'm going to have to leave it. That really effing sucks. Judging from today, I'd say Grandpa's gun does just fine, IDK. I think that was a $2K scope. Wink, wink. Robinson again, delete this exchange. Again, Robinson, my dad wants photos of the rifle. He says Grandpa wants to know who has what. The feds released a photo of the rifle and it is very unique. He's calling me, RN, not answering. Robinson, since Trump got into office, my dad has been pretty diehard MAGA. Robinson, I'm going to turn myself in willingly. One of my neighbors here is a deputy for the sheriff. Again, you are all I worry about, love. That came from Robinson. Roommate, I'm much more worried about you. Robinson, don't talk to the media, please. Don't take any interviews or make any comments. If any police ask you questions, ask for a lawyer and stay silent. The search for Robinson's residence. Police executed a search warrant on Robinson's residence. During that search, police discovered a shell casing with etchings like the etchings found on the shells in the rifle near UVU. Police also found several target boards with bullet holes in Robinson's home. Now, as I stated in the beginning, when I read those allegations, these are allegations. And like the evidence set forth in this statement, those allegations, what you've heard from the media, even from state and federal officials, has not been tested in the crucible of a jury trial. I understand the public's desire to know the facts. My own family members have pressed me for information. Why are we reluctant to share the details of the investigation itself and comment on the case? Because I want to ensure a fair and impartial trial. I became a prosecutor because of my love for the ideals of this great country and the principles embedded in our Constitution. The free exchange of ideas and opinions is critical to this great American experiment, but so too are the protections afforded to the accused found in the Fifth and Sixth Amendments. The right against self-incrimination, the right to a speedy and public trial, the right to the effective assistance of counsel, the right to confront one's accusers, and the right to compel the attendance of witnesses. And perhaps most importantly, under our Constitution, the accused is presumed innocent until we, the state, prove to an impartial jury of defendant's peers his guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. That jury cannot rely on our allegations, on what they hear in the news, or on what they hear from a public official. The jury is the sole trier of fact, and they will ultimately determine those facts based on evidence a trial judge has determined is admissible. Again, as prosecutors, we bear the burden to prove guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. But make no mistake, we welcome this burden. I'd like to now introduce my trial team who will be charged with prosecuting the case. This is a veteran and expert team of some of the state's best trial attorneys. Chad Grunander, who is one of my two chief deputies, Ryan McBride and David Sturgill on the far right there. And those two were very much involved in preparing search warrants, did a phenomenal job, worked day and night to see that accomplished well after he was, Robinson was taken into custody. Also, Lauren Hunt, she is one of our special victims prosecutors, and Chris Ballard, my second chief deputy, who will be handling motions. I'm going to explain just the procedural steps. We're not a grand jury, we don't have a grand jury system like the federal courts do. It's a preliminary hearing system. So the arrest and filing of the criminal information are merely the first steps in the criminal justice process. Today at 3 p.m., the defendant will appear before a judge in the Utah 4th District Court for his first appearance to be informed of these charges and to ensure that he has an attorney to represent him. The hearing will be brief. The judge will conduct that first appearance virtually via WebEx. This is not unusual. In the 4th District, all felony first appearances for defendants who are in custody are held virtually. A link to that hearing is available for media on the Utah State Courts X account at Utah State Courts. Now, following defendant's first appearance, he will be entitled to a preliminary hearing. At that hearing, the state will be required to show probable cause that defendant committed the crimes. The purpose of the preliminary hearing is not to determine guilt, but simply to assure the court that the prosecution has enough evidence to proceed to trial. If a judge finds probable cause and binds the case over for trial, an arraignment hearing will be held. At that hearing, a judge will again inform defendant of the charges against him and require him to enter a plea to each charge. The next step following the arraignment is an opportunity for the parties to file any relevant motions and then ultimately the trial itself. This case has generated a tremendous amount of interest across our nation and even the world. The public's desire for information is understandable, but it bears reiterating that this case will be tried in a court of law consistent with our Constitution, not the court of public opinion. Thus, we will only discuss the case with the press occasionally. It will not be a day-to-day or even week-to-week occurrence, but we will only do so in a manner as not to jeopardize the fair trial process. Before I conclude, I want to express my appreciation for the tireless work of our local, state, and federal law enforcement officers. They have an extremely difficult, dangerous, and often thankless job. I'm proud to acknowledge the exceptional work they do every day, and particularly their work on this case. It was truly a marvel to witness. Their skilled work and dedication have brought us to this point. I'm also grateful for the leadership demonstrated by Bo Mason, the Commissioner of the Utah Department of Public Safety, FBI Special Agent in Charge Rob Bowles, Utah County Sheriff Mike Smith, our local police chiefs, and Felice John Vitti, the acting U.S. Attorney for the District of Utah. I'm also grateful for the support of our Governor, Spencer Cox, and our Attorney General, Derek Brown, who is standing behind me today and has offered his support and resources as we proceed to trial. Finally, I want to thank our Utah County Commissioners, Amelia Powers Gardner, Brandon Gordon, and Skylar Beltran. They too have pledged to assist with the resources needed to successfully prosecute this case. I will now take a few questions.
For questions, ladies and gentlemen, just really fast, if you could identify yourself and what we're going to do.
Okay. They are still looking into it. It's an undergoing investigation.
So is that a possibility?
They haven't ruled that out.
Mr. Gray.
I thought in there with CNN, the text message that you
I don't have that information.
Emily Anderson, Stern,
Steve,
Southern
30 great.
Tribune. I know, acknowledging that you made this decision to pursue indefinitely independently. Did you hear it all from the Trump administration or Governor Cox's administration as you were working on these charges?
I talked to officials from both administrations, but I was not pressured to make a decision. I understood their feelings on it because it was in the news, but we didn't really discuss that.
Mr. Gray, the FBI director, sir.
I'm going to stick to what I just stated in my public, in our information. I think that is pretty much set forth there.
Mr. Gray, Ben Winslow, Fox 13 News. Just asking, are you planning to file additional charges against anyone else in connection with this?
Again, we don't have any information at this point of additional suspects, but I know that our law enforcement agencies are continuing to follow leads.
Mr. Gray, the FBI director today said that you are, quote, or that other people, a number of people are being investigated and interrogated. So it seems that there are people who might be up for possible charges.
Yeah, I'm not.
Do you believe that the suspect was a lone wolf, or could this be part of a?
I can't comment on that. I'm not aware of all their investigation. I just know that these agencies are continuing to investigate this case and follow all leads.
Would like to know, how does this possibly interface with any federal charges?
That's up to the feds. They have different charges and they're reviewing the evidence. And after they review the evidence and the law, they could file charges, but I'm not privy to exactly what they're looking at.
Dennis, have faith with the BBC. You've spoke a lot about text messages with the roommate. The governor previously said the roommate is cooperating, but could we see charges against the roommate?
Again, I'm not prepared to answer that question.
Mr. Gray, is it unusual to cite a political motivation as an aggravating circumstance?
It's part of our code. And so we charge that.
And Mr. Gray, Jim Suak with KUTV, for those that aren't of a legal mind, is this a confession, the text messages? Is that legally a confession? And is he cooperating since he's been taken into custody?
Ultimately, a judge will determine that at trial.
And cooperation, has he spoken at all? Has he been cooperating since he's turned himself?
Again, I'm not going to comment on that.
Has he made any statements at all?
Mr. Gray, Morgan Jesse, NBC News.
Okay.
What more can you tell us about the suspect's time online that some say radicalized him?
I am not aware of that information. It's, again, still under investigation.
And has he expressed any remorse so far about this?
I am not going to comment on that.
Is he continuing to not cooperate?
I am not going to comment on that.
Mr. Gray, the FBI director has been way out in front in terms of presenting evidence to the public. Your team has been very circumspect, very measured in what they've let out. Has that hampered your investigation and the build up to this?
Well, as attorneys, we typically like to control that information to preserve an impartial jury and a fair trial.
So it hasn't made it much easier.
Is he a lawyer yet?
Excuse me?
Does the suspect have a lawyer?
I don't have that information.
Can you tell us more about what the family may have said in interviews?
Um,
His mother?
What the family said is what I provided.
Mr. Gray, do you anticipate that the defense will try to get this trial moved out of Utah County, and how will you respond to that?
That from where?
From Utah County?
That the defense will be from Utah County?
Well, that they will try to get the trial moved.
The venue move.
I couldn't predict what they're going to do.
Mr. Gray, does
Is there any evidence to suggest that the timing of the shot and the question that was asked about mass shooting transgender, is that more than coincidence?
That will be for a jury to decide.
Mr. Gray, are you confident that the roommate had no part of this attack whatsoever?
Again, I'm not going to comment on the evidence.
But the evidence so far, does it show any involvement?
Again, I'm not going to comment on other than the facts that or the evidence that we've gathered so far.
Gray, does the mention of the DNA here in the press conference jeopardize his right to a fair trial?
I don't believe so. This is part of a public document that we have to file as we file a criminal information. We have to file a probable cause statement. That's a public document, and so we're comfortable with that.
Are his parents and the roommate still cooperating?
I'm not going to comment on that either.
The FBI has said that this suspect had a hate
I can't share any more than what I've already said.
This was
I-
an incredibly precise shot. Do you have any evidence that he went places to practice or had practice movements before the shooting that's giving you insight how he prepared?
The evidence that I'm willing to share is what I just read in our statement, and it's in
Mr. Gray,
the
Gentlemen, I'm
information.
afraid we're going to have to cut it off
About seeking
there.
the death penalty,
Okay.
if you could just answer, did you consult Erica Kirk about seeking the death penalty?
I'm not going to comment on that.
Okay, thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
All right, there you have it. Let's just lower this camera a little. Not sure why I'm sitting so low. Yeah, well, there you have it. A couple of surprises. I really was quite surprised at the thing where he said to his roommate, look under the desk and there's a note, and basically confessed to his roommate.
All of you know that the charges will be available online. We're in the final stages of processing that, and they'll be available on the utahcounty.gov website as well as on the Utah County Attorney's website. So look for them there. Thank you.
Cool. All right. Any questions? So the other video that I put up on members only actually deals with that mysterious note. Now some of that mystery is solved. So there was actually a physical note. Not sure whether the roommate burnt it. I do think where he said something like, delete this. And because there, I think, are 2 obstruction of justice charges. I think one has got to do with deleting digital evidence, and another one's got to do with deleting or destroying physical evidence. I could be wrong. But that is really quite interesting. And also, it's quite interesting how naive he was, saying something to the effect of, I wanted to go to my grave with this information, like as a grandfather, you know, and I didn't leave any evidence except, I mean, think about the evidence he did leave behind. Himself in a lot of footage, walking to the scene, leaving the scene, running along the roof, basically that his own mother recognized him. His DNA, basically all over the place on the towel, the bullet casings that were engraved, that were also found in his apartment, just the breadcrumbs of text messages. I mean, it's actually crazy how much evidence he left, given that he thought he didn't leave any. It really is quite crazy. Something I want to bring to your attention, which is for me very interesting. Did you guys know that Luigi Mangione is, I think he has a court appearance today as well. Let's just have a look at that quickly. And then I've got a couple of notes I want to just share with you guys. So this is from the New York Post. Luigi Mangione, top terrorism charges thrown out by the judge in massive blow to the district attorney. So, yeah, it's kind of quite ironic that both Mangione, there you can see him, and Robinson both have court appearances today. Mangione appearing in person. Robinson will be appearing via video. So, you know, that is kind of quite interesting. But that kind of brings up something I want to ask you guys. Might actually be quite upsetting. I must say the light is really quite bright on my face. Anyway, let's just do this. Yeah, so I've got a little notepad here with a couple of points I want to share with you guys. You know, there's been this sort of trend with this case where anyone who has celebrated Charlie Kirk's death has been fired, or there've been calls to fire those people, right? So I want to ask you guys a question. Do you remember when Luigi Mangione assassinated that healthcare CEO? Do you guys remember that? And do you remember how people celebrated then, right? So really what I'm trying to do is just make a comparison. And it was actually someone who communicated this to me, that the penny dropped. I was like, wow, that's incredible. So it's basically, do you remember when Luigi Mangione assassinated someone? Do you remember what the response was? I'm just waiting for someone to say yes in the comments. Do you remember what the response was from quite a few people? Right now, I can tell you that. So I wanna bring up this comment just in a second. So so um, so I remember I was actually covering Luigi Mangione, and a lot of people didn't like the sort of tone of it, that it's basically just prove, in a way, like what we're dealing with now, like proving that he committed the crime. People wanted to hear that he was like a folk hero, and they wanted, I guess, me to express support. And I was like, I don't understand. He did commit a crime. This is murder. How do you sort of kind of how do you commit murder and suddenly it's not a crime and it's actually you're a hero? Like, how does that work? And now you have another case, and the same thing kind of happening, and the only difference being that it seems to be people saying, well, you should really lose your job if you said something. And don't you find that like quite an interesting thing? Now, see, this one avatar saying it's two totally different things. Can you explain to me how it's different? So one person assassinates someone, and then there's an aftermath to that, and then another person assassinates someone, and then there's an aftermath. Is it not exactly the same thing? Someone assassinated someone. Someone assassinated someone. Someone wrote words and things on bullet casings and assassinated someone. Someone wrote words on bullet casings and assassinated someone. Sorry, am I missing something here? Yeah, well, it is different in the public eye for sure, but I'm asking you if it's different, not whether it's different in the public eye. I'm asking you if it's different. Titanic Discussions, thanks for that, says, is it a plausible theory that his father's disapproval is the real motive? I don't get that sense at all. I get the sense that he really didn't like Charlie Kirk, for whatever reason. I don't know what those reasons were, but I get the feeling that he really didn't like Charlie Kirk. And if you think about it, he's a student. Charlie Kirk's coming into their space, if you will. I don't know if you guys know that there were almost 1,000 signatures from students from that university who didn't want Charlie Kirk to address them. And the other thing that's interesting is Charlie Kirk, that particular event was actually the first of like a road show. I think there were going to be another 9 all across America. And so I think it was within 15 minutes of Charlie Kirk starting that he was killed. All right, so let's have a look at some of your, so here's someone who says Luigi was a victim. So was Tyler a victim? Can you apply the same stuff from the one to the other? And then if you say no, you can't, why can't you? Why does one set of circumstances apply to another? Then, anyway, Titanic Discussions goes on to say a desire to punish his father, although not fully. Well, I mean, there could be a subconscious element to that. I don't know whether it's hard to know whether his father knew exactly what was going on in his life. If his father gave him that as a gift, if his father was communicating with him saying, hey, I mean, who was paying for his studies as well? If his father gave that as a gift, and he was calling to say, where is it? Well, they were at least on talking terms, not as though there was that amount of enmity. So anyway, that's my opinion. I mean, it's really based on. So let's just see what the Batman says, but I don't really want to have a big political debate here, because I know what's going on basically in chat with many of you. I think a lot of you are sitting there going, whose side are you on? And if you're not on my side, I'm out. And imagine if you took that attitude in a courtroom. You literally went into court and you were like, whose side are you on? Because I'm on this, I've already decided I'm on this person's side. Like in the true crime space and the legal space, you're supposed to kind of have like that sort of blindfold that Lady Justice has, which is I'm going to impartially um, um, apply justice in this case. In other words, I'm not going to come to it with a preconceived judgment. That's certainly from a legal perspective. If you don't want a legal perspective, you might be on the wrong channel. Like if you want a sort of perspective that is, specific to your perspective, you might be on the wrong channel. I do understand that's popular and that's what people want. They want to hear, oh, you support this side. But I mean, justice should be impartial, which is why you want an impartial jury as well. I do think that's a very interesting question. Are they going to be able to find an impartial jury? So anyway, the Batman says, I don't think you're understanding my comment. I mean that the Charlie Kirk thing was facilitated by culture on the left. Right. So facilitated by a culture on the left. I would put it in a different way, that he was radicalized. And I don't even know if I would say facilitated by the left. I would say he was radicalized online. Does that mean he was radicalized by the left? Couldn't it mean that he was radicalized by the algorithm? And the algorithm radicalizes, you could argue, everybody. It intensifies whatever you feel about whatever, right? So right. I also think it's very early. Like we don't really know this individual. We don't know really who his friends were. But in terms of the group dynamics, which I spoke about yesterday, there didn't seem to be an obvious bias in terms of them. In fact, one of them said, Bro didn't deserve to go that way. So it doesn't seem like his immediate online group felt that way. Even his roommate didn't seem to approve of what he was doing. So how was he facilitated, right? Even his parents had a different view. So how was he facilitated? And if you say there's a culture, it's just facilitated in general by a specific culture. Well, there's that same culture mirrored on the other side. Like whatever you have on the one side, you have, in a sense, on the other side. So, I mean, you had the shooter, the Trump shooter was, I think, to some extent, I think a similar animal. You might say, well, he was also had the same politics, but didn't he say, wasn't there something about he would have shot Biden if he simply had the opportunity? He was simply trying to get an off ramp. What they call it, X by cop, right? So I don't know. It's very tricky territory. The governor, when he spoke, remember he said that social media has become a cancer. I work in social media, and I'm one of the first people who would say that's absolutely true. And the cancer is what's the word? What's that word when it cancer really? The cancer is, it's not benign. Can't quite think of the word, but the cancer is getting worse, and I've noticed that in true crime. I'm noticing it on social media. I actually want to bring up a New York Times article that talks about exactly this, just how it's not being social media's there's a regression in the sort of monitoring of social media, right? There's a regression in the how social media was once monitored. I'm very aware of it. I don't know if you guys are. It's from this article. Social platforms duck blame for inflaming divisions. This is where I differ with the Batman, where you say this is all the fault of the culture on one particular side. Well, what about social media platforms that basically, whatever those cultural feelings are, social media literally inflames them? And do they bear any responsibility? I believe that they do. So have a look at this. After authorities said Mr. Kirk's suspected shooter had been radicalized online. So you might say, you don't know what you're talking about in terms of this radicalized online. Well, that's what the governor said. That's what is being said in a kind of a mainstream way. And you might say, no, well, that's not what I want to hear. Well, that is basically right now the official version of what happened. And so they're talking about Meta, Reddit, TikTok, and other platforms have stayed quiet. And so this is a really interesting article. There you have it, called Social Media Companies a Cancer. And make no mistake, they are profiting handsomely, especially X, as far as I know. They're profiting handsomely from this violence. And I find that a very scary prospect, is that certain social media companies profit at our expense. Is that a good situation to be in? And by the same token, so if extreme violence gets a lot of views and is popular, right, then you have it in true crime as well. Then the more violent crimes you cover, the more grisly the crime, the more shocking the crime, the more views you're going to get. So aren't you kind of turning your audience into like a mob? And that's why I wrote on this little list here. Like about 2,000 years ago, there was a sort of amphitheater, and I actually visited it in person a couple of months ago. It's the Colosseum in Rome, and it's about 2,000 years old. This Colosseum is this massive arena, right? It's massive arena, and what people did at this Colosseum, what happened there was thousands and thousands of people would come there and watch people fight animals. Sometimes people fight other people, and of course the reason why it was okay was, well, it depended on who was fighting. If it was a slave, it was okay. You wouldn't really see necessarily a Roman citizen fighting a Roman citizen. You'd see sort of people regarded as not people killing each other and fighting each other, and they watched this while they sort of ate popcorn, right? This was entertainment, and this was 2,000 years ago, and it feels like we right back there now, that we are watching people killing people, but it doesn't really matter, in inverted commas, in quotes, it doesn't matter if the person was this person or that person. Of course it matters. And we should look back at 2,000 years ago and say, wow, they were really barbaric. They were really inhuman. They really had twisted idea of human rights, or whatever you want to call it. And here we are 2,000 years later, and it's like, well, if that person kills that person, he's a hero. But if that person who I don't like kills that person, well, if you say you like it, you should be fired from your job. It's like, what is going on with your human sensibilities? Like, no, both are wrong. One person killing another person is wrong. It's not this one is right, but that one's wrong. They're both wrong, right? It's just pretty crazy that 2,000 years later, it's like the mob is out in force and don't you even know it. And there's a really good analogy to this. It's a book I had prescribed at school called The Lord of the Flies, where it was the story about a group of boys being released on an island, and they basically just gradually give in to their savage nature. And isn't that happening with us? Isn't that happening with us? Aren't we being desensitized online and losing our collective humanity online and being desensitized online? What does KJM say? KJM says, it's a shame that these young people are so easily lured. Yeah. Well, do you notice what's going on? It's a lot of young men, right? And young men do have almost like a weakness for, like, young men want to assert themselves in the world, and often you find these shooters think about Thomas Crooks. It's a small sample, but Thomas Crooks, Koberger, and this one, all of them kind of shy, all of them not sort of the most extroverted guy. And so how they feel that they need to regain power is through violence, right? And it's a masculine aggression thing, and the original problem is that they feel powerless, that they feel weak. Why is that? And then why is the feeling that the way to respond to powerlessness, a lack of agency, is murder? I think Chris Watts had the same thing. I've got a situation, I don't really know how to deal with it. I'm a man. Well, I'm going to just fall back on my sort of barbaric instincts. Well, we shouldn't really support that if we civilized, if we're law-abiding. Thanks, Julie. Thanks for that. Something else I want to cover was basically just that the blood sports in the Colosseum, which do you remember if you watch Gladiator, and he doesn't really want to even participate in this. He's an ex-soldier, and he basically just goes through the motions, and then he sees everyone applauding, and he's like, "Are you not entertained?" Right? And is that what this is all about? It's not really just entertain, but whose side are you on? It's like football or some kind of game. Well, I'm on this person's side, and we're watching blood sports. No, this is like the mob in a Colosseum, and it's just the Colosseum is being provided by social media. That's the platform, and is that really right in the 21st century? Beverly Mary says, "Good to see you. Thanks for your message earlier." She says, "It is desensitized." I've covered true crime a long time, and I can't remember when last I saw someone die online. Like, I can't really. I think if you want to go and look at that stuff, you can, but I don't know whether it's ever come across my feed where it's like, wow, I saw someone die online, and we literally saw two people die online, one after the other. The one was that poor Ukrainian woman on the train, and then almost like the very next day, not quite, like a couple of days later, Charlie Kirk. And in the past, that kind of thing would be absolutely not allowed, absolutely censored. But now apparently it's okay. And isn't that just a sign that we're desensitized? Spirit of 1776 says, I never saw the awful coverage. And, you might even think, you're a true crime channel. Isn't it your business to cover that? Shouldn't you be showing that? Well, I sort of feel like conscientiously, no, I don't want to traumatize you. Like, it's really traumatizing to see someone in that sort of situation. It really is very, very traumatizing. It's disturbing. People, I think, around the world have been really traumatized by it. It's shocking. And this whole idea that, I actually want to make money out of shocking you and people circulating this. Think about how inhuman that is, where it's like this thing that is so tragic, so terrible. Someone else is saying, how can I manipulate people and how can I get some money out of it? I mean, how psychopathic can you actually get, right? There were people who looked at that footage and they wanted to make it worse. They wanted to show it in more detail. They wanted to, you know, emphasize it. And you've got to kind of think to yourself, what kind of heartless person wants to do this? Well, someone who's just a greedy pig. Basically, that's your answer. And there are a lot of greedy pigs on social media and a lot of greedy pigs feeding the trough and pigs coming to the trough, right? I must say, after I watched it, I was like, I don't really want to watch this again. It just is so heartbreaking and terrible. And instead, I've looked at pictures of that woman's life, just getting an idea of who she was. But I mean, you can decide what you want to preoccupy yourself with. You can watch that stuff over and over again, and it'll probably radicalize you. You'll probably start having feelings of hatred towards someone. How does that make you better than the person who committed the crime? I don't get it. Really don't get it. So just a couple of points from this particular Timmy, stop snoring. Just a couple of points from this this New York Times article. I just wanna highlight them and see if I can just get them on screen. In no particular order, here's one of them. See if I can put it on screen. I kind of have things reversed here. So if I want the thing on that screen, in how I'm sitting, it's actually on that screen. So if I move my cursor that way, it actually moves that way in my reality. So it's just a little bit disorienting. Anyway, this is from the New York Times, and even President Trump was saying that he felt that Robinson was radicalized on the internet. So, if you're going to question that, I think you must start asking, why are you being so defensive? The internet really can radicalize. I wrote a book called Slaughter, and one of the cases I covered was the Boston bombings. And there we actually found that these kids, I think they were Chechens, but living in America, they'd been radicalized online. They weren't part of some group. They simply just fixated on certain things and through that started to hate America, and then they perpetrated the whole Boston bombing thing. They didn't go to meetings. They were simply radicalized online. And that's why we've got to treat the online space as something that is not above and beyond rules and codes and all of that kind of thing. And you can imagine the social media companies don't want that because it's going to hurt their incomes. They're getting massive incomes and it's going to hurt it. And you can imagine people like me, creators like me, also don't want that because it's going to hurt our incomes. Well, I'll be the first person to say, no, I think that is good for society. It might not be good for me. It might not be good for, business or whatever, but it's good for society. Isn't that what we care about? or do we just care about ourselves? And there you have it. What's the response been from social media companies? They've just stayed quiet. It's a bit of a craven silence. It's a bit of a craven silence. So here's another screenshot. I think here's another one. So they say their reactions are starkly different from a decade ago. That's absolutely true. I've been working online for around about a decade. I've written over 100 books, and things have changed. Executives at Google, Facebook, Twitter, other sites vowed to work together to limit hate speech, remove violent content, and root out disinformation. Since then, there's been a weird kind of entropy where as there's been this just general shift. It just seems like these social media companies have become more permissive, right? It's not just removing violent content, it's disinformation. There's been a lot of disinformation that has led, I feel, to sort of where we are. I mean, there's disinformation about climate change, there's disinformation about COVID, there's disinformation about what people are saying in American politics in particular. A lot of the whole Charlie Kirk thing was about what I'm telling you are the facts, and someone else saying no, that's disinformation. I mean, there's a really good video of him talking at the Cambridge Union. I actually think I've stood in that room. I had a friend who studied in Cambridge. She became a doctor of zoology, so I've actually been there. But um, um, I think a professor debates him, and it's literally about, does my information trump yours? Who has the greater claim to the truth? And we really in that place right now. And it's literally where one group will say, well, these are the facts, and another group will say, no, it's a conspiracy. One group will say, these are the facts. Another one will say, yeah, but I believe that. One group will say, well, these facts you can prove, but I believe X, Y, and Z. Another one will say, well, I believe in those facts. But how can you have objective truth somewhere in there if some of the objective truth is subjective and another section of objective truth is subjective? And I find that terrifying, is that we can choose our own reality, because it means if we start doing that collectively as a species, we are very likely to be doomed. Like, if you can't agree with what reality is, then when something happens, you can get yourself into real trouble. I want to quickly give you, that's really what I was looking for. It feels like the policing of certain things in social media has regressed, and it's become malignant. It's become actually harmful. And I don't know if you felt it, if you're struggling to sleep and you struggling with anxiety and you struggling with even internet addiction or whatever, because the algorithm is so effective at sort of sucking you in that you can't seem to pay attention to anything else, right? I mean, it's very, very good at what it does, but how good is it for us? How good is it for a human being? And I want you to think about this not in terms of, I'm Gen X, right? I grew up, I mean, although I'm not that old, television came to South Africa quite late, but I literally grew up before TV. Like, I think I was 7 or 8 years old when we got the first television. I still remember we looked at the test pattern for and then after that, there was the introduction of the VCR, and that changed things in a big way. If you were a TV addict before, well, now you're really going to watch a lot of recorded TV, and sometimes you watch it over and over and over again. I know my brother and I were huge TV addicts at home, and I remember the TV series V. I mean, we started getting up early in the morning to watch it, but and then eventually there's the advent of the internet. And so, I mean, I'm from a generation that there was no internet at a certain point, and then there was, right? As kids, we were on our bicycles on in the neighborhoods. We would roller skate. We would, we were active in sports and in all that. And these days you don't see that. A friend of mine's got 3 kids, all of them just became gamers. And like me and this friend were at school together and we played sports all the time. We went to play tennis the other day. It's like, no. Another way, the way that the kids have fun is they just sit behind a screen all day. But I want you to think about children. And if you look at this book that I'm holding up, it's called The Anxious Generation by Jonathan Haidt. It's Haidt. I really highly recommend you read this book. It is, if you look closely, there's sort of a astronaut and he's surrounded by, looks like stars, but actually he's floating in a sea of emojis. He's floating between these emojis. It's a really great cover. What makes this book so fantastic, but also so troubling, is you think about all of this stuff from the perspective of kids that live their whole lives within the context of the internet and social media. In other words, they're born into this world, right? And then you say, well, they're not really any guardrails. What can go wrong? And he basically quotes statistics, and he says how actually social media is far worse. The group that is the most vulnerable is really interesting. The group that are the most vulnerable to all of this stuff are prepubescent girls, because literally what they are seeing are other girls, like the prettiest girls, taking selfies and so on, and then they feel very insecure about themselves. They feel very, to some extent, invalidated, or and they're comparing themselves. And if you think about it in a classroom setting, where you have one girl that is particularly pretty, and she takes selfies all the time, it becomes like that one girl gets everyone's attention, and it's almost like 99% get zero attention when they not as pretty, but they're certainly pretty as well, and they've got other things going for them besides their looks, right, or the shape of their body. And so there's this very invalidating thing. But anyway, he was saying it's prepubescent girls who are the most affected by social media. And then the next, and he was saying, although boys are affected, they're affected in a totally different way. So boys are affected by when they're very young, they're exposed to hardcore pornography, and they think that is normal. And you can imagine when a boy is being programmed that that's normal, and then they have their first relationship with someone, and they sort of take that into the relationship. It's like, wow, what do you want me to do? You know, what's going on here? Think about just the extremes we've been talking about in terms of this, in terms of sexual awakening, like what is normal in terms of that, given the internet situation that we live in. And then there's another thing, also violence with boys, like boys are any boys. I mean, Robert Redford has just died, and I mean, he was a man from a previous generation who acted in cowboy movies and gangster movies and action movies and romantic movies, and he was a certain kind of hero for his time, right? But he was a boy's hero in the sense that, remember that one movie that I really loved, I think it's called The Natural, where he was a baseball sort of rookie, and then he had his moment, right? I really loved that movie. I actually, when I was a kid, I thought I was going to grow up to be Robert Redford, but because I was kind of had blonde hair and so on, but didn't turn out to be the case. But the point being, on the other side, is boys are naturally more aggressive. They are interested in violence, but in a kind of in a different way. But that interest can be weaponized, where you make them just interested in violence all the time. I mean, boys have a natural urge, in the classroom, to who's the strongest, who's the fastest, who's the toughest, all of that kind of thing, which girls don't really necessarily have, certainly not to that extent. And if you weaponize that and you sort of feed that, and it becomes a computer game that just is all about that, you can imagine how becoming addicted to that changes a boy and changes a boy's psychology, in that really sensitive period where a boy is becoming a man. And that's exactly the stage where Tyler Robinson was. He's 22 years old. He's sort of still a boy. If you look at some of his interactions with his roommate, it's kind of boyish. It's very different to what you'd expect from someone like Koberger, right? It's he's still becoming a person. So anyway, let's have a look at what it says here. So anyway, I just want to recommend this book, and you get a real sense of how scary and dangerous all of this is when you don't think of how it affects you. I mean, you certainly do think about that. You certainly see it indirectly, but when you see how it's affecting children and youngsters, and how they have like literally no protections. And he has a fascinating and excellent analogy to what he's talking about, where he says this whole project, the internet and social media, is a little bit like someone saying, hey, who wants to go to Mars, right? Who wants to go to this totally different world that we haven't experienced? And you put up your hand and you say, I want to go, right? But it's not an adult, it's a 12-year-old or a 14-year-old. It's like, we want child astronauts to go to Mars. And he sketches this story where he says, so you go to Mars, but when you go there, you get exposed to um, uh, harmful sun rays. There's no ultraviolet protecting the planet, so the exposure to harmful sunlight is really, really severe, and so your risk of getting cancer is extremely high. um, and it just goes through all of them. If you go to Mars, you may not ever be able to come back. They don't actually tell you that. Like, if you go to Mars and let's say you spend a year there, or whatever the length of time, actually you may never be able to come back to Earth, because once you've stopped being exposed to a certain level of gravity, and so your body becomes weaker, and so when you come back to Earth, you're going to just sort of not be able to deal with it. And when gravity is different, your bones can actually I think shed calcium, and so you might have this sort of delicate skeleton when you return, and then literally you can't walk when you come back to Earth. And think about that analogy with when you go into social media and you go into the internet, you can't like come out of it. Like, in other words, you like can't come back into the real world because you've been so weakened, and so much has been taken away from me. And the biggest thing that's taken away, not only from children but from all of us, is just experience, like human experience. Walking your dog, going out into the sunlight, being in the garden, just like a day spent doing certain things. And I think a really good analogy to what I'm talking about is a car. It's comparing the human body and the human activity to a car. If you take a car and you just park it in a garage and you leave it there, right, for a few days, and then a few weeks, and then a few months and longer, well, we all know what happens. The battery goes flat, and then the car doesn't actually even work at all. Why? Because you haven't actually used the car. The car is a machine that if you use it, it works. If you don't, you lose it. And a human being is the same way. If the human being doesn't go outside and run around, he starts becoming fat and sickly and mentally ill and all sorts of things. I actually did a story some time ago of a guy who collected Mercedes-Benz vehicles, and eventually had this whole factory, like this whole hangar filled with 50 or 100 or really many amazing vehicles. But the problem was they were like parked right next to each other, and so and then eventually, like the what do you call it, the wheels would just kind of explode. The wheels would literally get kind of stiff. You almost, if you imagine the rubber perishing, and then there'd be like a bam, and it would basically, the tire would basically explode. And literally just from parking a car for a long time, that would happen. In some other vehicles, you'd have the oil in the little pipes turning to vinegar, right? Basically, not vinegar literally, but basically just rotting the oil, and then the pipes rotting as well, so that certain things wouldn't really work anymore. And so he found that unless he took all of these vehicles out for a little bit of a drive, regularly, if you weren't careful, you wouldn't be able to get that car moving again, and you'd be in trouble. And human beings are the same way. And social media is causing us to be like a whole bunch of cars parked in a big room, just sitting there. Meanwhile, all the healthy juices and all the things that we suppose that we have, all our potentials to be, athletes or joggers or dog walkers or rollerbladers or whatever, that's besides our lives as, whatever job we have, all of that um, is affected. And am I making my point? You guys follow where I'm coming from? Sybil says, just like muscles, you have to use them or they waste away. Yeah. Andy says, I have to pick my kid up from school. I don't see a civil war yet. Okay. It's interesting that you brought that up. A movie came out called Civil War. And that movie basically is acknowledging the zeitgeist, right? It's quite a scary movie. It's just from the perspective of a photographer who becomes very wary of what she's doing. And then a young photographer comes up and admires her so much that she becomes this monster who takes photos of war and just loses her humanity. I don't know if you saw that. If you haven't seen Civil War, check it out. It's also really disturbing. Anyway, let's just conclude with this, some of these excerpts. So decades ago, these platforms vowed to work together to limit all of this, remove violent content. Now there's this comparison. The aftermath of Mr. Kirk's killing shows how inflammatory and hateful online content has become. So now like we're living in a environment where someone goes from saying something to hate, just like that. I've experienced it quite a lot. I don't engage in it. As soon as someone goes to that point, I just leave the conversation. But it's just astonishing how quickly people go from I don't know you at all to I hate you. It's like you do realize I'm a person. You're also a person. I've always heard a good guideline for how to behave online is, imagine the person you're talking to is sitting in your lounge, right? If people carried on the way they carried on online on social media, in a lounge or in a big forum, what would happen? And I think the answer is what you've just seen in Utah. And that's not good. That's not right. That's not normal. Can you imagine if you're sitting in a lounge with a bunch of strangers and someone makes an objectionable remark and you say, block, I block you? It's just totally absurd. Or they mute, I mute you, you're muted. And we at this point where there's blocking and muting because people aren't talking to each other anymore. It's like black and white, and it's my way or the highway, and I want to hear what I want to hear, and if I don't hear what I want to hear, then I can mute you. Well, what about a polarity of views? Because a polarity of views also, not a polarity, a diversity of views. Because the same applies to you. If someone doesn't agree with your views, are they allowed to, should you be silenced? And so anyway, they say social media companies are no longer promising to solve it. There you have it. They're no longer promising to solve it. And who needs to hold them accountable for that? Who needs to put pressure on social media companies to solve it. Well, you guys and me, everyone has got to care enough to say, this isn't right. That's again why read this book and arm yourself with information where you can say, they've done these studies and it really is harmful. It's getting worse. It's really something we need to turn around, right? Andy says, I didn't even realize he was live reading. I popped in here to waste time. Geez, thanks. That's a compliment. So anyway, there you have it. We have regressed, said Graham Brookie, the senior director of the Atlantic Council's Digital Forensic Research Lab. I feel the same way. I think we have regressed. The technology has freaking, improved at a incredible rate, at a clip. But we as people have regressed, maybe, I wouldn't say in spite of it, I would say as a result of it. And then Brookie says, we are in a worse place now than when countries and companies came together to say never again to violence and hate speech online. We are at a worse place. And I've written I thought, a really powerful piece. I'm hoping that it'll be ready for YouTube tomorrow on nihilism. And if you think about it, what's going on right now in the world, there's a very serious war going on in Europe of all places. And it's been going on for years now, right? In our lifetimes, on our watch. It's a really bad war that is not stopping, and it so far seems to be spreading. There was just an incident in Romania and another incident in Poland, right? And the same thing, like, if you don't care about violence online, how are you going to care about violence in the actual real fucking world? The thing needs to be, you should care about violence. And I think true crime in a way addresses that, which is, well, true crime is often about violence. True crime is about, we need someone to take responsibility for this. Okay, but it doesn't stop with a criminal committing an act and hold them, bring them to justice. It's violence as a thing. Violence is a thing where someone commits a crime, yeah, but also violence as a theme online, but also violence in our society. And also the thing that is the epitome of violence, which is war, right? And then in our lifetimes, we've also seen what's been going on between Israel and Gaza. That's another big war. I don't know if you guys know, today, Israel literally invaded Gaza with tanks. All of this is taking place right now. And I think a big reason for it is we've just become kind of immune to violence, and we should be sensitive to it. We should be intolerant of it. For years, social media companies pledged to cleanse their sites of toxic content. And 7 years ago, Zuckerberg said he was going to hire people to work on that. What happened? What has happened to that? And now, of course, we've got a totally different addition to this whole cocktail, which is AI. Now you have AI, which can basically enhance all of this stuff at the drop of a hat. And so you've got AI that can make everything that is going on, everything that has been going on, can make it better or worse, right? That's the danger, is that it can make it worse. Just want to see if I've got another screenshot to share. No, it's not that one. Well, I think that's just about it. I think there's one more screenshot, but I can't quite find it. See if I can just have one more look. Yeah, okay. Anyway, it's from this article from the New York Times. Let's just bring it up. So I'll put a link to that in the description. Go and give it a gander. It really is, I think, worth your time. Okay, what was there? Something else I wanted to share with you guys. Yeah, so a video that I've published in members only, it'll probably be available tomorrow or something, deals with this note. So where you heard about basically the confession, essentially where Tyler Robinson says to his partner, I did this, and I knew, I saw an opportunity, and so I took it. His partner can't actually believe it. He's like, why did you do this? And so when I was doing that analysis, um, it was hard to know, were we dealing with an actual paper note, or was a note as in like a note written like a Word document, or was it a text or something like that? And it does appear that there are maybe there's an online and an offline version of it. So the other thing that I think came out of this press conference was we now know where the weapon came from. It was, I think, his grandfather's rifle that his father gave to him as a gift. And you get a sense of, in a way, that how he's still a child, where he's like, my old man is going to ask me where it is, and I'm not going to be able to give it to him, and then I'm going to be screwed. So I don't know about you, I thought he initially intended to leave the rifle where he left it, so that people could read the casings and it was a kind of message. But it turns out I think he went to get his car, something like that. He went to get his vehicle, and then he was going to pick up the rifle, but then there were already police vehicles in the area, and so he didn't feel it was safe to do that. And so um, I know when they first found the rifle, I thought surely they'll be able to trace him just based on the serial number on it. That's an easy way to do that, and I think he mentions that in that correspondence. So yeah. Yeah, well, Ashley says, how stupid can you be using your grandfather's gun? In the week that he spent planning this, I don't know how much time he spent thinking about, what if I get caught? What am I going to lose if, he didn't spend too much time thinking about that. In other words, not too much critical thinking going on, certainly in terms of that. Charlie's Army, thanks for that comment. She says, I encourage everyone to check out Nick's books. Thanks for that comment. Yeah, and I mean, that is a kind of magical thinking, is here's a difficult situation, here's someone I don't like, here's a particular set of circumstances. Well, if I shoot, then that's going to solve everything, and I can just go back to my life and live happily ever after. That's like magical thinking. That's like, what kind of fairy tale universe do you live in? Answer, I really do think computer games are a big factor in this. I think it's going to be shown. I think it is going to be shown. And we've already seen evidence of it, that his partner was a big-time gamer, and he was as well. A lot of the references, even this was for me really interesting, is the people who recognize that there were memes in this whole story. He talks about that he wrote meme inscriptions. He used the word meme in his dialogue with his roommate, which just shows you to what extent he's in the sort of niche area, right? Spirit says, what is a recommended good one to read? Well, I'll let you guys answer that. Thanks, Chelsea, for that. Okay, I think I'm going to end off just with a clip from Fox News, and then I'm going to say my adios to you guys. But yeah, thanks a lot for joining me. Thanks for your comments. Let's see if I can find some other comments to put on screen. Thanks, Marlene. My throat is really starting to hurt at this point. Elmo says, what do you think about him being shot from the left? Well, I think he was shot from the left. I mean, that's where the roof sort of juts out. I don't know if you mean the far right. Oh, I see what you mean. Do you mean, yeah, well, because I think the way you're looking at me, he was struck. Well, let's not really go into that. Christine says, I'm on a 1987 model millennial and living in South Africa, being raised in conservative Christian values, grounded me in morality. So do you think without conservative Christian values, people are not moral? Like, do you think you have to have the only values are conservative Christian? Like, are there values beyond those? Maria says, it's great to see you again, Nick. As always, love your insights and contribution to expand the greater concept to see through the fabric. Thanks for that. All right. Well, I didn't really think that this would be this long. It's already 1:41, but it's definitely given me a little bit more. It's made me comfortable being in this space. I'm not in the live stream space very often, but feeling a little bit more comfortable. So who knows, maybe I'll do it a bit more often. Okay, I see Christine's trying to say something. Yeah, my throat's also sore. Sorry to hear about your throat, your sore throat. All right, guys. I'm going to play out with, thanks a lot, Freeze Peach. Thanks. I'm going to play out just with this commentary from Fox. Okay. Oh, okay. I agree with that. Okay, cool. Okay, let's have a look here.
Right now, there's a report this morning of an online confession from the man accused of gunning down Charlie Kirk. Doug Ozeder's live in Washington. Doug, good morning.
Good morning.
So the report comes just as Tyler Robinson's scheduled to have his first day in court, essentially saying, I had the chance and I'm going to take it. So what do we expect today when obviously this will be?
So that's really the last thing I want to say on this is you kind of get the feeling that he was radicalized in isolation, like alone. You know, it wasn't like there was a group of people where he was planning this with. I'm just saying that appears to be the case right now. It may not turn out to be true, but, you know, to say I had the chance, not we saw the chance or something like that, you know, it does seem at this point that this was a private obsession of his, that was a private gripe, right? And that in itself, I think, is quite interesting. Let's just listen to a little bit more.
A high-profile appearance, even if it is likely by video.
Well, yeah, it will be by video if it happens. I mean, this is scheduled to happen later on this afternoon, and these would be the state charges against Tyler Robinson. We do expect those charges to include aggravated murder. Now, the aggravated part of that is important because that could potentially carry the death penalty. And
so the last thing I want to say on this is that I'm a little bit surprised by the death penalty thing, and it might change just because to some extent I won't say cooperated with the authorities, but he certainly turning himself in was helping them. And you can see that he didn't want to help them, that he was even considering unaliving himself, right? That is mentioned as well. That's another thing that I think brings about another element, which is that he was deeply unhappy about something, right? Tyler Robinson was very upset about something, and that is something he seemed to have in common with Thomas Crook. So that's another thing where you sort of say, what is going on with young men today? Why are they so deeply unhappy? Why are they, what is their grievance, right? And I think it's really on both sides. And that's something I think we need to think about is our world becoming happier or unhappier, especially for young people, right? Okay, That is it from my side. Again, thanks a lot for joining me. Thanks, guys, for the super chats, Titanic discussions, and Maria. And I will see you guys next time. Take care. Bye-bye. Let's just do it like that. Sorry, I'm a little bit rusty here. Let's move this over there, and then I can do it.